Hello. If you're looking at this video, you must have a student in my 8th grade U.S. history class. My name is Renee Bock, and I'm going to walk you through a little bit about what our course will be about this year. So, first thing is time period. We are talking first encounters through the Gilded Age, around 1607 to 1900. So that's the time period. You might be wondering, who am I? I was born and raised in Wisconsin, moved to Chicago for graduate school, and stayed there until just a couple years ago when I moved out here to Seattle. I did my undergrad at Alverno College. I received my master's at Concordia and received my teaching of English as a second language endorsement at the University of St. Francis. So I'm from the Midwest, but excited to be here in the Pacific Northwest now. You might be wondering, what do we work on or focus on in U.S. history? What we're basically focusing on is developing those historical thinking skills, executive functioning skills, organization, and their intra and interpersonal skills, so that students know how to work with others and to understand their own thinking. When we think about historical thinking skills, the slide can look daunting, but the main point here is that we don't want students just gathering nuggets of trivia. That can be fun for playing games, and sometimes you might even win, but what we want is to create young people who can move forward and actually be able to think and do some deeper analysis. For that reasoning, we focus on things like chronological reasoning, the question of how and when did something happen, what's the same and what's different over time, what time period are we talking about, compare and contextualize. This one's huge because with phones right now, students have a world of information at their fingertips, but if you can't put it together, can't connect the dots, can't figure out, you're just looking at information that it doesn't mean anything. So we focus on that. We also work on the idea of historical interpretation and synthesis, being able to figure out, why is someone saying what they did? What does it mean? How does the time, the person, the place have an impact? And for students to be able to explain that back in their own words. We also work later in the year on historical argumentation, figuring out how to stake a claim, how to support it with evidence, how to listen to the responses of others and be able to share if you have a different argument that you want to present. So that's all the meat and potatoes of what we do and how we do it. Even though we're in the Zoom meetings right now in the red remote, we can still work together in groups to create visuals that show understanding of topics, to develop and support claims, share ideas, to develop those active listening skills. That's even more important in the Zoom meetings, to develop that skill, and to learn how to share ideas in order to ask the higher level questions, because the better questions lead to more solid answers. Individually, we work on building nonfiction reading comprehension skills, nonfiction writing skills, the metacognitive skills where students can analyze how they can improve their study habits, and we wrestle with complicated topics that sometimes take processing time, individual effort. That's the work your student would do after class. Why do we do it? Because we know that knowledge of U.S. history helps students participate as active citizens in a democracy through being able to have a deeper understanding of the context of issues when voting, which will be in 4 years for them, awareness of issues around justice, equity, access, to develop their empathy and strengthen that through interacting with their peers, to examine historical events through diverse perspectives. We want to teach students to look at more than one point of view, to ask why and to ask why not, to be able to think more deeply and to understand their role. As this quote shows with the leaf here, if you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree. And that's what's important to us. Our students need to understand where they are, how they're connected to the whole rest of the tree, the branches, the limb, the leaves, all of it. And we do that through getting them to learn how to look at things in more than one way. Some of the topics that we cover will seem familiar. They're colonial development, American Revolution, creation of the US Constitution, westward expansion, the pros and cons of moving westward, the Mexican-American War, the idea of technology as being a creator of both progress and destruction sometimes, We look at the pre-Civil War American life in both North and South. We look at reform movements and the role of women in American life. We definitely focus on the American Civil War because that was a cataclysmic game changer for this nation. And we look at the challenges of Reconstruction, political and cultural changes. And we know that some of those changes have impacts that just reverberate even today. So those are some of the topics that we look at. And you might be wondering, how is COVID-19 going to impact learning? Well, we know that Red Remote model, what we're in right now, means we use the Zoom meetings to help build active listening, public speaking, and interpersonal skills. There will be more use of outside apps for practice and reinforcement, and we will have teacher hours available to help students be able to check in if they have questions. Schoology is going to be the main receptacle for learning materials. If you need something, when in doubt, check Schoology. When we go to Orange Hybrid, that will mean that we have in-person meetings that will allow for some socially distanced social interactions. We'll continue to use the apps, but with more in-class sharing of the results. Teacher office hours will still be available, and Schoology will still be your main go-to place to look for learning materials. When I say apps, I'm talking about like Sporkle, we've already started using, Kahoot, iCivics, Checkology, Quizlet, CNN 10. Your student will be using these apps to complete the kind of practice, drill, reinforcement type activities that sometimes we did together in the classroom. We can still work on these sometimes as teams, sharing out. They'll be able to have some interactions with other kids as they work in the apps. Excuse me. Resources, where to find things, because that's always a big question. Like I said, Schoology, your go-to place. There you'll find the Weeks at a Glance document each week. I also email that to you directly in Skyward so that you can have it as well. You'll find the weekly folder, the previous week's folders. Every week when the week passes, I put that week's folder into another folder so that there's a space to go. If a student needs to reference something from a week or 3 weeks ago, it'll be there. We also have the Class Resources Hub and then some documents and links in there. All of that in Schoology in our materials. That Week at a Glance document, that's the one that shows you Zoom links for each period, Zoom links for office hours, information on what we're doing in the unit, standards used, daily activities, links to learning activities. It's all there in the WAG. Class policies and homework. The goal is to make this reasonable. We give time in class if it's a larger assignment to get started. We will have those office hours available. Your students shouldn't be saying, I have so much social studies homework. It should be around 20 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. If it's more than that, check in, have your student check to see if perhaps they're misunderstanding an expectation or putting different pressure on themselves that might not be accurate. The way that we grade. Standards-based, we do it on a 4-level system. This is not point scrubbing or just letters. It's not how much you throw at me, it's the quality of the work that you do. Formative work, which is practice, will be entered as a no count so that you can see it in Skyward, but it doesn't actually impact the final grade. That will be impacted when we do a summative assessment as we finish up a unit. Not every assignment is going to offer a chance to earn a 4. Sometimes the highest level will be a 3 or a 2, especially as we start a unit and we begin with basic recall kind of work. So the breakdown is right here. The aim is to always go for whatever is the highest available. And we like to use criteria sheets and rubrics to help students understand what it is they need to do to earn the highest level of grade. What can you do on your end to help? Ask your student each evening what homework they've got to do. Help them learn how to use some form of a calendar to keep track of what's due and when for which teacher. Remind them to charge that iPad every night. Watch the news with your student and discuss a little bit what you see there. And encourage your student to advocate if they need help. We're here to help. This is a whole different world this year. Some things remain the same, but other things might look a little different. So reach out. When in doubt, reach out. And for reaching out, you can find me at renee.com DEBOCK at mercerislandschools.org. As many of you know from, if you open up my Schoology, my Skyward messages to you each week, you can see my email address right there. Find me if you need me. I'll usually respond within 48 hours at the most, often more soon, quickly, sooner than that. So whatever you need, find me if you need me. Otherwise, I look forward to meeting your student, working with that student, and having a great year in U.S. history, regardless of what's going on in the rest of the world. Here at Mercer Island School District and at IMS, we're taking care of our business. Thank you.